with new HIV infections, 45%, is amongst the 15 to 24-year-olds. That's a terrible statistic. And then 3 million young women, girls in Africa, still suffer the health implications of female genital mutilation. And as somebody who was born in a country where this is still practiced very extensively, Somalia, for instance, 97% of girls are still subjected to this ordeal and all the long-term consequences. It shows you that the challenge is immense.
When we are fighting for our freedom, we had that tendency of ignorance. By that time, we were only 3 million. Being that, so as a politician, I thought of it. I found it very abnormal to allow family planning in our midst.
One of our mentors told me and other colleagues once that the best time to make mistakes in your life is when you're young, because then you would be forgiven and you would be given the opportunity to amend your ways, and when you grow, you'll be responsible.
All right. My own president, considered one of the greatest political leaders, if not the greatest that Africa had, actually forbade family planning. And he said, no, nothing of contraception should be imported into Ghana. He had to die, he had to leave before we were able to come out and do family planning. One thing which I think we have to admit today, that good as fertility can be, good as youth can be with its motive force to help development, it can also be a drag because it is the lower end of youth is a dependency end. And if countries produce these young people and they don't have the resources, the mental capacity and others to give them the quality that they need to become useful, it is dragging. It's a human right to be educated, but it's not human right simply to have a little bit of numeracy and nothing else. I have had girls of 12, 14 who have finished what we call junior high school. They don't know anything about the human body. So we say we'll give them sexual and something rights and so on. The general background on which we are going to build this, which should have happened in the schools and so on, has not happened. And I believe that one of the priorities that we old people, join with the young, should make our governments provide for right now is quality education for all, not simply education for all. We shouldn't say we are training the leaders for tomorrow. These are the leaders. Leadership has all its levels, like political administration has its levels, so has leadership. Right inside the home, an older child can help look after a younger child. And how that older child looks after the younger child is dependent on the training and the link between that older child and parent. So the generality is, let the political and other people give the youth a chance to learn and be involved. Teaching and learning are two sides of the same coin. Anybody who teaches and never learns, but it says, I've learned everything that I'm going to teach, is a bad teacher. We shouldn't get them. You will get your learning as you go along from your students and with your students.
The African woman makes life happen. And giving the opportunity to be stronger with economic empowerment and viability, and also the opportunity to study, the African woman can make a lot more difference. I think that critical in this dialogue is the issue of livelihoods for young people, especially the young girls, and sustained education, plus continuing and sustained safe space for young people to be part of the decision-making process. But beyond decision-making process is the point of implementing the decisions we are making, implementing the policies, and also following up on our policy commitment to ensure that we do not just have conventions that sit on the shelves and gather dust, but they are implemented with the right people in the action and giving the right support and systems that ensure that we are actually achieving results. And that for me is one of the biggest achievements that I have seen in IPPF, that we are doing, creating safe space for young people. In our communities, the challenge that we see, which continues to exacerbate the issue of unplanned pregnancies and school dropouts for girls and sometimes for the boys, is the fact that in situations where young people cannot continue education, they are left with very much little opportunities to be self-sustaining and to have a life of their own. So often the girls would then have to fall on the strength and sometimes privileges provided by older men and some other people in community. And that makes young people in the first place very vulnerable to acts that violates their sexual and reproductive health rights, and even to an extension, their right to grow and develop and become responsible adults in their own right. And that for me is a major challenge that we need to deal with.
Every month I have dialogues with at least 200 young women and boys. The first challenge they face is the hypocrisy in African culture, the so-called African culture. The girls are very concerned and are actually constrained by the culture that Madam Kankasa has talked about. It's conformist, it's authoritarian. And the girls, some of the questions are, why do I have to kneel for an uncle who I know is trying to sexually molest me? Those are some of the questions they ask. People do not want to talk about why they ask girls, for example, to pull the labia. And yes, we do talk about that with young women and boys in the room, so I'm not ashamed to talk about it here. They ask, I am going to marry a white man. Why does the culture force me to pull my labia? And we have no answers for them. The African culture talks about types of relationships that they think are good, but the intergenerational sex for young women is a big problem. So they feel they cannot stand up as young people and talk to the older generations because they do not behave in the way they talk.
We need an enabling environment for that dialogue starting from the family. And I think that's where the main challenges is. Parents are not able to dialogue with their children on issues of sexuality because of our cultural context and cultural background. I'm a mother and I have a 10-year-old son. And you know, unless you create that enabling environment and you tell your child, you can ask me anything. No question is stupid. I'm your best friend. And I think that is where we need to start, and that's the main challenge.
Thank you.
The majority of the problem we face is based on our values. We tend to ignore the facts and just hide behind the culture. Statistics shows that 80% of the young people are already sexually active before the age of 20. But yet, we tend to ignore this fact and not talk about it. You can hear from the last speaker, this thing we openly talk about. She's not comfortable mentioning it. You can easily teach a child about the nose, about the mouth, but you can't talk about the penis or the vagina. It's a difficult thing to talk about. So if we are able to clarify our values and create a space where these things can be openly discussed.
We fail to access these services, sexual reproductive health services in the clinics, because the nurses are not youth-friendly. Most nurses are not facilitated on how to deal with as youths. So the important thing I would like to urge all the nurses, if we have any nurses here, and all the doctors around, is to educate your nurses on sexual reproductive health services. They pretend that they are nurses when at heart they are not youth-friendly. You would go with an issue and this person looks at you to say, at your age, how did you get syphilis? And you know, we are sexual active, and that's the fact thing you should understand, to say, we all do this sex. We all do sex, whether in the house, whether in the bathroom, whether in the toilet or whatsoever. But it's the most important thing that everyone in this building is breathing. We would like all the nurses, all the doctors in this building to be educated on sexual-friendly health services.
Okay, thank you.
The youth themselves must find their way to the policy formulating tables. and begin to push issues that affect them. So they must find their way. We must have members of parliament that are youth. We must have as many members of parliament as possible that are women, because that's where the laws are made. And when we go into parliament, for example, when we were passing the domestic violence bill in Malawi, we were only 27 women. But we had to go and collect trucks and trucks of women from the villages to get into parliament, to see their member of parliament say no. And that's the only way we were able to pass it. And I would like to urge the youth that's why I insist that their time is now. They can't postpone their leadership. We must go to parliament together, women and youth. We must go and fight together.